Welcome back to Knowledge Media. Um, this week we're going to do a tutorial on how to effectively use pivot tables. Pivot tables are a really good way of looking at a bunch of random data. Well, it doesn't necessarily have to be random, but it can be just data. For the case of this week's tutorial, I put together um, some data using a fictitious car dealership. So as you can see here, I have, the month the vehicle was purchased, the type of vehicle, the year, the manufacturer, the model, color, and so on. Um, Pivot tables are great because we can put this data inside of um, the pivot table actually. And what it'll do is categorize it, and we can look at um, average car prices, average um, marital status of who purchased which car. It's some light data analytics, data analysis. So let's go ahead and get started. What you can do first is take a look at your data, just kind of see where it is, what the um, what the categories are, and what you want to do with it, and what do you want to look at when you're looking at a pivot table. All right, so first, you put your data on the first screen here, on the first tab, which I've already named them. This one's car sales. I already named the second tab the pivot, and what you want to do is you want to click over to that table, and what you can do is go to Insert, and you just click Pivot Table. Simple as that. The pivot table is going to ask you, the menu is going to ask you, what range and what data do you want me to look at? What you then do is just click over to your car sales, and you just want to highlight all the data. I'll move this over here. All the data you want to look at. So you want to look through A through M, and what you can see over there that puts the dollar signs, it's locking those cells. And you want to go all the way down from A through M, all the way down to, let's say car sales, I think we have 200 something here. There's a shortcut to highlighting all this data, but for now, I'll just do it manually. 213 cells, okay? And then you just say okay. And it brings the pivot table back to your tab down there below. Now let's go ahead and move that down a little bit. And it lays all your categories out right here. And then from here, you can start to look at the, what do you want to look at? So let's say, for instance, you were the manager or the owner of the business, and you wanted to look at sales at a particular location. So first, you could select location. What you want to do with that is you want to put that in filters, not values, because it's actually a name, it's not a number value. So you want to look at, let's go ahead and open these up a little bit. All right, you want to just select, you got your Aventura, your Brickell, and your downtown. Let's say we want to look at only Brickell sales, right? Okay, so it's going to filter the data only from the sales made that year at the Brickell location. And then from there, you can just start to pick, what do you want to look at? Well, let's look at the type of car that was sold throughout the year. Compact convertibles, coupes, exotics, sedans, and SUVs. Okay, well, what manufacturer from these categories were sold at that location? All right, you can just click manufacturer. Now, it's going to put stuff in the count, but it's not, if you put it over in the count, it's not going to necessarily tell you what manufacturer, because it's just going to tell you how many of that specific type was sold. So you can see, if we keep it in the rows, I'm sorry, in the values, it's going to tell you how many. So 22 compact cars were sold throughout the last 12 months, 12 convertibles, 16 coupes, and so on. So a total of 128 vehicles were sold at that location. But let's say you wanted to see what specific manufacturers were sold. You would just move this over to rows, and there you go. Simple as that. You can see all the different manufacturers and the types of vehicles that were sold. All right. Next, let's say you want to look at the specific model. Well, the model can't be a value, right? Because it's not a number. So the model is going to have to be broken down under the rows. So you can select model, and it's going to put it over there, but just move it back, and you can see at that location, the compact car for Chevrolet was a Chevy Cruze, the Honda Insight, the Kia Sportage, and the Nissan. Okay, so as you can see, you can compile it just like this, and it'll show you specific model, specific um, category of car that was sold. But let's look at something that has a number value. So you can bring up, let's do buyer age. Okay. And what that's going to do, it's going to sum up all the ages. And you don't want to look at that. You want to look at, let's say, an average of the age. And it's going to give you long, and you can format this data and clean it up before you really look at it. And you just highlight it and go back to data. Where is it? I'm not used to. There we go. You just want to bring it down here. Okay. So as you can see, the sales for that location, the average age for a Chevy Cruze buyer was 22 years old. So as you can see, the data kind of goes along with, who would buy these types of vehicles. An entry-level vehicle, something like a Chevy Cruze, a Honda Insight, compact, cheap, low cost. The average age was pretty young. And then we get down to the convertibles. You can see the average age of a BMW buyer. The Chevrolet Corvette, the Nissan 350Z, they were a little bit higher. These are a little bit higher priced vehicles, which we can actually take a look at in a second and see what was the average price of these vehicles. And then you can just add that in. Where is price? Price is right there. And again, it's going to give you the sum, but you don't want to look at the sum, you want to look at the average. You just double click it. I'll do it again for you. You just double click that cell and you say, hey, I want to look at an average. Boom. There's the average price. And again, the average price goes along with the level of vehicle that we're looking at here. Chevy Cruze, the average price sold at that location was $20,934. And you can always format this if you want to look at the dollar amounts differently. So you can just highlight the cells like you normally would in any kind of Excel. And you can hit add that, or you can put it in dollars so it's easier to look at, because we're looking at dollar amounts here. And it makes the data look clean and more concise when you're looking at it. All right, so what we have here is we're starting to look at this data and make sense of it. Next, let's say we want to look at what else has a value? We can look at the year. We can look at the average year that was sold. So Like before, it's going to look at a sum, but you don't look at the sum, you look at the average. Okay. And you can look at the average year of those vehicles sold. This dealership, for all intensive purposes, is just for newer vehicles, 2014 through 2019 new vehicles. So get your average buyer, get your average price sold for those those models, and you have your average year sold all the way down. And then you can get your average overall, which wouldn't necessarily matter because we're selling all sorts of vehicles and all levels of vehicles, but your average price was sold was 42,000. Your average age was 43, and the average year was 2016, which we can clean that up a little bit, make it look like a year. And we can clean these up too. Just put that right there. The most expensive vehicle sold, you can see, was obviously it was the exotics. And that was the average price sold. The average price for your sedan was 40,000, and there's a breakdown of the sedans, all the way from entry level to a little bit higher. Lexus, Mercedes. You can see the price gets a little higher, which makes sense. Same thing down here. You got your SUVs, a little bit older buyers, more expensive. Makes sense. So that's it. That's what you can do with pivot tables. And it's a really good way to take data that's categorized and really break it down and try to make sense of it for any kind of analysis. That's our tutorial for pivot tables. Thank you for joining.